The Boy Who Reversed Himself by William Sleator, 13. Come, my little ones, outside, outside, to watch morning. We eat and watch morning come. There was a sharp tug, Kata, and above us. The cage was swinging again, back and forth, up and down, Anna and Kata. On the other side of the grid, dark kaleidoscopic patterns flashed by. Pete, rubbing his eyes and groaning, had fallen asleep too. We both must have been so exhausted that even extreme nervous tension couldn't keep us awake. What do you mean I got it all wrong? Pete had demanded last night when I had pulled away from him. Didn't you hear them? They want to help us find the way back. Oh, Pete, it's not that simple, I said, slumping against the grid. Yes, it is. Don't you understand? His larynx was tense with excitement, making his voice shrill and high-pitched. Maybe we can get out of this horrible place after all. He squeezed my hand, beaming at me. Isn't it wonderful? This is the first good thing that's happened since we got here. I looked away from him, not knowing what to say, my hand limp in his grasp. Maybe it would be better not to tell him the truth. He was so pitifully exuberant now. He was certainly easier to get along with when he was in a good mood. If he knew how hopeless our situation really was, he'd just get hostile again. What's the matter with you, Laura? He said, his smile fading. Look at me. You should be celebrating, not sulking. I'm sorry, Pete. I turned back to him, but I couldn't manage a smile. I guess I just can't believe it's going to be that easy to get home. There you go, being negative again, he accused me, dropping my hand and scowling at me. I'm so tired of your moodiness and depression. Being with you just makes everything worse, and I wish you'd wipe the mud off your face. I'm sick of looking at it. I couldn't help remembering how differently Omar had reacted to my unhappiness the day Pete had walked off with Arlene. Omar had cared about me and tried to understand what was wrong. He had gone out of his way to make me feel better. All Pete could do was lash out and try to punish me, and here I was, trying to protect his feelings. And so I lost control and lashed right back at him. If you had a brain in your head, you'd know what was wrong, I said. We can't let them take us home, don't you see? Our world is completely vulnerable to them. They could destroy everything. We can't go home unless we can get there without showing them the way. And how do you think we're going to do that since we can't even get out of this cage? Got any ideas? Oh, you're just being hysterical, inventing things to worry about, he said with a gesture of disgust. The expression on his face was a lot more unattractive than the insides of his intestines. What makes you think they'd want to destroy our world, even if they could? I noticed some throbbings of doting concern from Gigigi, who was still watching us. Ramoon had gone off to do something else. I tried to ignore her. It's not that they would plan to destroy our world, I said, trying to sound reasonable and not hysterical. It's just that they would have absolute power over it because of being a dimension higher than us. They could do whatever they wanted to us, and no one could prevent it. That's why we can't do anything to let them find where we came from, even if it means we have to stay here for the rest of our lives. To protect Three Space, of course, was why it made sense that anybody who got caught in Four Space had to be killed, but I didn't mention that to Pete. Somehow I wasn't sure exactly why. I didn't want him to know anything about Omar. Instead, I added sarcastically, "Still feel like celebrating, Pete?" That was a mistake. He lunged at me and grabbed my shoulders, squeezing them painfully. Listen, it's not my responsibility to stay here forever just because you have some crazy idea about what they do to our world. If I can get them to take me back, I will, and you can't do anything to stop me. Let go of me, I said, wrenching away from him. If you want to go home, I will, and you can't stop me, he said again, sounding more self-righteous than angry now. What can I do to stop you? I can't even get out of this cage, I said, rubbing my shoulders. Oh, come on, Pete, let's not fight. It just makes everything worse. Don't blame me. You're the one who started it by being in such a bad mood, he said, voice petulant. Okay, I'll try to be more positive, I sighed. We're both tired. Maybe things will look better in the morning. He stared at me, then took a deep breath. Yeah, maybe they will. Then he looked down, embarrassed. Laura, I'm sorry if I hurt you, he said a little sheepishly. I didn't mean to. I just was so excited about going home, and then... It's okay, Pete, I said. I can forgive you this once. And finally, we curled up together on the floor of the cage. We both needed a little comfort. The next thing I knew, it seemed to be early morning, and Gigigi was crooning at us and carrying us outside, and everything was as hopeless as ever. Air and fresher smells rushed into the cage. The grid swung open, 2 blobs dropped some hunks of food. 2 other blobs dropped something that glittered. The grid slammed shut. Eat, little ones, eat and see. Gigi's thoughts were like eager panting. You eat and try instrument Ramoon has made for you. You see rise of sun. I dreamed I was home, Pete said, keeping his face away from me, as though he was trying not to cry. I couldn't blame him. It was demoralizing to wake up and find ourselves the helpless prisoners of 2 monsters. We should try to eat something, I said. We'll probably need the strength. Gigi burbled with delight at the sight of our digestive process. Then she was urging us again. Try instrument Ramoon made for you. I know you will like. Try, and you see. The last crumb of gingerbread fell from my hand, and we rolled around on the pillowed floor, as many cracked and grimy blobs shook the cage impatiently. Try instrument. Gigi want little ones try. She must mean that thing she dropped in the cage. I crawled around the rocking cage until I found it. There was more light now. As the cage stabilized, I sat back on my heels and looked at the thing. It had lenses and a wire frame with 2 hooks that fit over the ears. Like those special glasses jewelers wear, or a funny pair of binoculars, a little stab of curiosity and excitement pierced through my miserable mood. What is it? Pete said, crawling over to me. Some kind of glasses. I turned toward him. Do you think it's really possible? What's possible? That these things can make it so we can see force-space the way force-space creatures do? Not just cross-section, but solid 4-dimensional objects. See? There's 2 lenses at one end and 3 at the other. I don't get it. It makes sense, Pete. 3-dimensional people need 2 eyes, binocular vision, in order to perceive depth, the 3rd dimension. So in force-space, they need 3 eyes, trinocular vision, in order to really perceive Anna and Kata. This thing gives us 3 eyes, Pete. Fumbling with sudden eagerness, I slipped the hooks over my eyes. Beyond the grid, I saw blurry smears of black and gray, and faint touches of lavender. A dark, crouching shape billowed out of my view. No, look at Gigi. Look at world. Look at rise of sun. Why was Gigi so shy all of a sudden? Why didn't she want me to see her? But I was too busy to worry about that now. I concentrated on bringing the blurry world into focus, adjusting my eyes to the lenses. Triple images pulled together, fuzzy surfaces grew sharp-edged. Space unfolded, expanded, and stretched away. It was like suddenly finding myself looking straight down from the top of the world's tallest skyscraper. It was crazier than the cross-sections. Everything was more than it should have been. Many-faceted, infinitely complex. Each leaf had swollen into a miniature tree. Each gray emerging tree was an entire planet of foliage, seen from the inside and the outside at the same time. Nearby, the trunks all veered away from me as though I were lying on the ground looking up. But a little farther away, they all seemed to stretch toward me, as though growing up the inside of a deep crater. And beyond that, they pointed down at me, as though I were looking at them from above. The sky, like the ground, kept showing up in unexpected places, underneath and behind the trees, as well as Anna and above them. Let me see now. My turn, Pete said, made impatient by my exclamations of amazement. No, wait, not yet. I pulled away from him, focusing on the sky. The lavender glow of morning was emerging, not from one puny little direction, as in 3 space, but from every edge of the sky that I could see. The rising sun about to appear did not seem to be a point or a disk, but a vast ring that embraced the entire horizon. Blue and red spears of brightness shot out from all sides at once. Continents of Klieg lights going wild. Then the sky was too dazzling. Here, take a look, I said, handing the glasses over to Pete. I squeezed my eyes shut, dizzy and overwhelmed. Oh, a boring rise of sun, that's too bad. Tomorrow it will perhaps be nicer, or the day after that, or the day after that, or the day after that. Little ones will see. That ruined it. I remembered where we were, and Gigi didn't sound terribly eager to get rid of us. But did little one like? That was Ramoon. Can little ones understand how to use instrument? That was what I suddenly wondered, why Ramoon had gone to the trouble to make the trinoculars for us. Was it simply to give us the experience of seeing things in full 4-dimensional splendor out of the goodness of his heart, or was it maybe to enable us to get around better so we could lead them back the way we had come? I think so, Ramoon. See how it looks around? But we must find out. We must find out exactly how much they understand. I have been working on a way to do that. Bring them back inside. What kind of a way, Ramoon? Nothing that will hurt them. You must promise. I have already made enough promises. Bring them inside. But just as the cage was lifted, I heard something in the distance. Was it a voice singing? It was faint, but it seemed to be approaching, and it was not just an emotion in my brain, but an actual sound. A rumbling, booming voice singing a vaguely familiar song. Tra-la-la-la, echoed the voice across the rolling, tilting countryside. Little brothers, here I am, bringing luck and jollity. Wait, someone is coming. Who could it be? No one ever comes this far out into the wilderness, Ramoom. What if someone sees me? I felt the horror in her mind at the thought of that. I don't like it. He must not see me. He must not find them. Now Gigi's emotions were shrill with panic. They belong to us. No one else must see them. For once I agree with you, Gigi. No one else must find them. Yet. Not until we know more. Not until we are in control. I do not understand you, Ramoom. But why do you hesitate? Bring them inside. Not safe enough. He must be searching and snooping somewhere else. I have it. The pit. Go hide your ugly face from the stranger. The cage lurched wildly. What's happening? The trinocular glasses tumbled from Pete's eyes. Now what are they doing with us? I don't know. Shut up and listen. But not the pit, Ramoom. That is truly unsafe. You know what we sometimes find in there. Please. They are secure inside the cage. I know. I made it. The pit is the only place where they will be safe from prying eyes. Go into the house and hide yourself, or you will be seen. Not the pit, Ramoom. Please, no. Enough. I will do what I wish, or I will desert you. Gigi. And then the cage was being lowered into what seemed to be a smelly hole full of leaves and dirt. There was a heavy thud above us, and the hole went dark, just as I got my hands on the trinoculars. Ugh, this place stinks. But Pete, did you hear anything? Like maybe a voice, the creature they're hiding us from? I'm not sure. I was too busy trying to see through these glasses. I don't like it down here. I could almost swear it was a voice I've heard before. But where had I heard it? Too much was happening all at once for me to be able to think clearly. All I was really sure of was that the voice was associated with something unpleasant. It was like a reminder of a nightmare I had worked very hard at trying to forget. I did have the feeling, though, that it had something to do with Omar and with some kind of secret I wasn't supposed to know about. How could you hear it before, Laura? Shh. See if you can hear it, too. Nothing at first, then the song again, muffled but growing louder. You hear it, Pete? Barely. Doesn't sound familiar to me, he said. I also sensed vibrations in the earth. Not the rhythm of 2 feet tramping closer, more complicated than that. Was there more than one of them? What would happen if they did find us and take us away from Gigi and Ramoom? Would our situation be worse or better? Maybe it was some creature coming to carry out the law, to kill us before we gave anything away, but before I had a chance to worry about that, I became aware of a gnawing, chomping sound very close to us. A sandy slithering, a shifting of soil, the rustle of pebbles dislodged. A little light had penetrated around the object covering the hole, and my eyes were adjusting. I slipped on the trinoculars and peered out through the grid of the cage. I screamed. 6 slitted eyes were staring at us, above 2 spherical mouths ringed with fangs. Laura, what? Then Pete screamed too. However horrible it looked to him, it probably looked worse to me with the trinoculars on. I could see that it had 2 heads. I could see that the 2 heads were attached to a single body of braided cylinders. What I could not look away from, and I could not look away from the eyes. I was riveted in the same way that a trapped bird is hypnotized by a snake. That's what this was, some kind of burrowing force-based snake with 2 heads. The heads lunged, 2 sets of fangs sank into the grid. A tail thrashed above, knocking more pebbles and dirt onto the roof of the cage. Sand sprinkled on my head and feet. The grid rattled, the entire cage trembled as the snake violently shook it. Whimpering, we crouched together against the back wall, as far from the snake as we could get. But what if the grid sprang open? What if the cage was not as secure as Ramon thought? One head chewed the grid, the other darted to the side, poking, prodding, twisting at the bars. Were force-based snakes intelligent enough to open latches? If they were, which head would get us first? Would they fight over us, or would they share us, one for each? We were both screaming again. The snake kept biting and wriggling. There was a click. The grid shuddered and began to open. Laura, it didn't get in, did it? Did it? Yes, it's getting in, I sobbed. Yes, it's getting in, I sobbed. One of the heads was trying to work its way through the gap where the grid had opened. The hole we were in seemed to be too narrow to allow the cage to open completely, but now the two heads were working together, one of them pushing earth and stones aside to allow the cage to open wider, the other continuing to wedge itself toward us. Soil shifted, the grid shivered, the gap widened, the head inched closer. Suddenly, light splashed into the hole. The cage sailed up out of the ground, tilting from the weight of the snake, and still clung to it with one head. The grid swung wide. We tumbled toward the other set of fangs opened for us. Two four-fingered hands closed around the snake's heads, pulled them away, and flung it to the ground. At the same time, a six-fingered hand slammed the grid, which felt like bed springs as my body hit it and was bounced back into the cage. I heard Gigigi's voice shouting what sounded like curses in her thoughts. Oh, my poor little ones, my poor, poor little ones. Gigigi save, Gigigi not let bad thing hurt you. And a moment later we were back inside the house, the cage hanging from its hook, as Gigigi, still keeping carefully out of sight, continued to soothe us. I remembered that when Gigigi had first given us the trinoculars, she hadn't wanted us to see what she really looked like. That meant she assumed we understood their use. But I didn't want them to know how much we understood. I was still wearing them. That was why I had seen her hands as hands, not blobs. Now I quickly pushed them to the top of my head like a tiara, as though that was what I thought they should be used for. They argued for a while, Gigigi accusing Ramoom defending himself. Their dialogue shifted, Ramoom insisting that he should do the experiment on us soon, so that they could learn as much about us as possible before anyone else came along. There didn't seem to be anything Gigigi could do to prevent it. I don't like the sound of this experiment, Pete said weakly. Neither do I. We had both barely recovered from the snake's attack, and already Ramoom was setting up equipment, kata, below the cage. And that's the end of chapter 13.